The 12-year-old contestant walked onto the America's Got Talent stage and said, "The person who raised me is in this room." Simon Cowell stood up from the judge's desk and couldn't speak a single word. The lights were bright. The audience was buzzing with anticipation. Another Tuesday night taping of America's Got Talent. Simon Cowell sat at the judge's table in his usual position, black shirt, arms crossed, that familiar expression of measured skepticism on his face. Host Terry Crews walked to center stage with his signature energy. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next act." A boy walked out from backstage. 12 years old, maybe 13. Brown hair, simple jeans and a button-up shirt. Nothing flashy. He carried himself with a quiet nervousness, the kind every kid has when walking onto a stage in front of thousands of people and millions watching at home. The audience applauded politely. Simon barely looked up from his notes. Just another audition. Just another hopeful kid. Terry approached the boy with a warm smile. "Hey there! What's your name, young man?" "My name is Daniel Rivers," the boy said, his voice small but clear through the stage microphone. "And how old are you, Daniel?" "I'm 12. 12 years old. And what are you going to do for us today?" Daniel looked out at the audience, then at the judge's table. His eyes lingered on Simon for a moment, just a beat longer than normal. "I'm going to sing." "Fantastic. And who are you singing for today? Family? Friends?" Daniel's expression shifted. Something vulnerable passed across his young face. "I'm singing for the person who raised me after my dad died." The audience made a collective sound of sympathy. Simon finally looked up from his notes, his attention caught. Terry's smile softened with genuine compassion. "I'm so sorry to hear about your dad, Daniel. That must have been really hard." "It was," Daniel said quietly. "I was 7 when he died. Car accident. It was just me and my mom, and she was struggling. We didn't have money. We didn't have much of anything. The theater had gone quiet. Even the cameraman seemed to be leaning in. But someone helped us," Daniel continued. "Someone my dad used to work for. Someone who didn't have to do anything but did anyway. He paid for everything. My school. Our house. Food. Everything. For 5 years, he made sure we were okay." Terry nodded encouragingly. "That's beautiful, Daniel. That person must be very special to you." "He is," Daniel said. Then he looked directly at the judge's table. Directly at Simon. "And he's sitting right there." The 12-year-old contestant pointed at the judge's table and said, "The person who raised me is in this room." Simon Cowell stood up from his chair and the entire theater froze. Simon's body went rigid. His arms uncrossed. His hands gripped the edge of the desk. The other judges turned to look at him. Howie Mandel's eyebrows shot up. Heidi Klum's hand went to her mouth. Sofia Vergara leaned forward, confused. The audience erupted into whispers. Cameras zoomed in on Simon's face, capturing the exact moment his legendary composure shattered. "What?" Simon's voice was sharp, cutting through the confusion. "What did you just say?" Daniel's eyes were filling with tears, but he held Simon's gaze. "You knew my dad. David Rivers. He worked on one of your shows in London 15 years ago. Sound engineer." Simon stood up. Fully stood. Something he almost never did during auditions. His chair scraped backward. "David Rivers," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper but caught perfectly by his microphone. "You came to his funeral," Daniel continued, his voice breaking now. "I was 7. I didn't really understand what was happening. But I remember you were there. And then you were just gone. Except you weren't really gone. My mom told me everything last month. She said it was time I knew the truth." The control room had gone silent. Director sitting forward in his chair. Producers frozen. Every person involved in making the show understanding they were witnessing something that transcended television. Simon walked out from behind the judge's desk. stepped onto the main stage floor. The audience gasped. In 15 seasons of judging talent shows, Simon Cowell didn't do this. He stayed at his table. He delivered his critiques from a distance. He didn't cross that line. But he was crossing it now. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 15 years earlier. Simon Cowell wasn't always the global television mogul and music industry titan everyone knows today. In 2009, he was already successful. X Factor was a hit, he was a household name. But he was also working constantly, managing shows across multiple countries, living between London and Los Angeles. One of his UK productions was a talent show pilot that never made it to air. Small crew. Experimental format. It didn't work out, but Simon had liked the team. Good people. Professional. The kind of crew that made television work even when the concept didn't. The sound engineer on that show was a man named David Rivers. Mid-30s. Quiet. Competent. The kind of person who did his job perfectly and never caused problems. Simon had maybe 3 direct conversations with him over 6 weeks of production. When the pilot was cancelled, Simon moved on to the next project. David Rivers went on to other shows. That's how the industry worked. You worked together briefly, then you scattered to different productions. 2 months later, Simon was in his London office when his assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. A woman named Sarah Rivers." Simon didn't recognize the name. "Do I know her? She says her husband worked on the talent pilot. David Rivers." Simon vaguely remembered. The sound guy. "What does she want?" "She wouldn't say. But Simon, she looks really upset." Something in his assistant's voice made Simon agree to see her. Sarah Rivers walked into his office looking like she hadn't slept in days. Red eyes. Trembling hands. She had a little boy with her, maybe 7 years old, hiding behind her legs, clutching a stuffed animal. "Mr. Cowell," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I didn't know where else to go." "What's happened?" Simon asked, gesturing for her to sit. "David, my husband, he was killed 3 days ago. Hit-and-run driver. He was crossing the street coming home from a shoot, and..." She couldn't finish. Her hand covered her mouth. The little boy, Daniel, started crying quietly. Simon felt something cold settle in his chest. He barely knew David Rivers. They'd worked together for 6 weeks. But he remembered him. Quiet. Professional. Always had a smile for the crew. "I'm so sorry," Simon said, and meant it. "Is there anything I can do? Do you need help with arrangements? I can make some calls." "We don't have insurance," Sarah interrupted, the words tumbling out desperately. "David was freelance. We were going to get it next month, but we were waiting until... And now there's the funeral, and I don't have money for it, and I have a 7-year-old son, and I don't know what to do, and I'm so sorry to come here, but David always said you were fair, and I just thought maybe..." She broke down completely. Daniel wrapped his small arms around his mother's leg, both of them crying in Simon Cowell's office while he sat behind his desk feeling utterly helpless. Simon wasn't good at this. Emotions. Crying people. He was good at business. At deals. At telling people whether they could sing. Not at this. But he heard himself say, "I'll take care of the funeral. All of it. Don't worry about the cost." Sarah looked up shocked. "Mr. Cowell, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling you. David worked for me. He was a good man. It's the right thing to do." He wrote a check that afternoon. Covered the entire funeral. Sent flowers. Showed up personally to the service, sat in the back, didn't make a scene, left quietly. He thought that was the end of it. A kind gesture. The right thing to do for the widow of someone who'd worked for him. He'd done his part. But 2 weeks later, his assistant knocked on his door again. "Sarah Rivers is here." Again. Simon felt a flash of annoyance. He'd helped. What more did she want? But he told his assistant to send her in. Sarah walked in looking marginally better but still devastated. She didn't have Daniel with her this time. "Mr. Cowell, I need to tell you something," she said, sitting down without being invited. "We're being evicted. I can't afford our flat anymore. David's income was everything. I have some savings, but it'll run out in maybe 2 months. I'm looking for work, but I have Daniel to take care of and I don't have family who can help and—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm not here to ask for money. I just wanted you to know that what you did, paying for the funeral, it meant everything. And I wanted to thank you before we have to leave London." Simon sat there looking at this woman who'd lost everything, who was about to lose her home, who was trying to thank him even while her life fell apart. He thought about saying the polite thing.